Okay. There we go. Maybe I am live now. Okay, good. All right. Let's just well, there we go. Okay, getting set up. All that good stuff. Perfect. All right. We'll go ahead and share this out. Make sure everyone can access it. If you're listening to this and you can't hear me, let me know in the comments. I've got my mic plugged in, but I feel like there's something funky going on with my gain. So, all right. Let's go ahead and I'm just going to go ahead and get this shared to my other pages so that everybody can join us and see what all the fuss is about. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So I'm in South Dakota where it is currently, I don't know, something like negative 17 degrees outside. And I feel like there's a little bit of lag going on with the internet. So I'm waiting for my Facebook page to very slowly load. Oh my gosh. I know, because it's really fun to hear about somebody else's like trials and tribulations with technology. You can do it. You can do it, little Facebook page. There we go. Okay. All right. All right. We're making this happen very slowly. Okay. Spin, little wheel, spin. Oh my gosh. Okay. Okay. All right. Oh, it's so slow. It's trying so hard. It's trying so hard. Okay. All right. Sorry, just bear with me here. I have this little sign that I made for when I need to like go make coffee. So I'm just going to put this up for a second while I get things working. Okay. All right. Okay. Yes, Tim, you just heard yourself hiccuping. Okay, I'm here. We're ready to go. I had to kick the internet box a few times, by which I mean I sat here and clicked some buttons. So that's figuratively what we're talking about. So, hi, hello, everyone. Hello, Damien. Hello, Tim. Hello, Bob. Hello, Kevin. Hello, Sarah. Hello, Kevin. All I'm happy you're here. I'm happy I'm here. I hope that wherever you are staying warm and cozy. Tonight is a great night to stay indoors and listen to some podcasts, have some tea, read a book. Don't go outside. It is -17 out here if you're just joining us. It's real real yikes outside. I've got a nice hot cup of coffee here to keep me alive and awake. I hope that you are alive and awake wherever you are. And let's see. Oh, hi, Sean. Hello, hello, hello. I love that you're all here. So I thought that tonight we could talk a little bit about writing. Sean says -17. That's not enough degrees at all. I agree. I had to do a target this afternoon, and like I had a scarf, like a big fluffy blanket scarf. Essentially, it's a blanket that you're allowed to wear in public, wrapped around my head, and I have a down coat, and I had the coat up to here, and I was just like this sad little marshmallow person bumbling into Target, and I was like, my head shrank down into my shoulders, and I had like my eyes closed, and I was like feeling my way into Target because it was so windy. So it was pretty terrible. So I agree that -17 is not nearly enough degrees. Hello, Michael DeAngelis is here. More blankets should be publicly acceptable. I agree. One of my favorite blankets I got when I was on a Delta flight, and it was really, really cold in the cabin, and they gave everybody a pity blanket. And so I kept that red Delta blanket with me at my cubicle at my old job. And whenever I was cold, I would just put it on my legs. And then my brazenness, my confidence with wearing this blanket at the office sort of escalated as I stopped caring so much what other people thought about me. And pretty soon I had a pair of slippers under my desk too. And so I would like wear the slippers under my desk, and I had my lap blanket, and soon the blanket actually started migrating. And like, so it went from my lap to, I would like wear it around my shoulders like a cape. And it got to the point where, and anyone who has worked with me can attest to this, I would be like walking to the conference room, like in my slippers with this Delta pity blanket tied around my shoulders, like shuffling like some kind of like weird office superhero. This is why I'm not allowed to have a normal job. I scare people. So, yes, blankets should be socially acceptable to wear out and about in any situation. And like we've made them a little bit more so with like the whole poncho thing. I don't know. I think I might still rather tie a blanket around my shoulders than like go outside in a poncho though. Hi, Jimmy. Oh, Damien says, I feel like my soul needs today's topic bad. I'm stressing because it's been too long between my show episodes. Yes, even if it's just about to enter sound design. Yeah, yes. Kevin says, Sarah has a hero persona. Thank you. That makes me feel better. Up until I started this live stream, I was wearing my giant blanket scarf around my neck. And then I was like, well, I'm doing a live stream where, you know, people probably want to see my face and not like this like mass of scarfy fabric. So hello, here I am. So I have coffee to keep me warm in one of my favorite mugs that says not blood, because it's not blood. This is coffee. Yeah. Oh, Tim says that Facebook is auto-tuning me. That's cool. So this is me as a pop star and a hero today. I've got a lot of identities going on. No, but today's topic, I'm going to talk about podcast production and writing production and any type. This applies to any type of creative production. Whether you are working on chapters for a novel, whether you are creating episodes for your podcast. Damien says, likely story, it's totally blood. Don't tell everyone my secrets. I need this to live. Okay? I need this to live. It's hard. It's hard to keep up because when we start a blog, when we start a podcast, when we start publishing books, if you publish the first book in a series, if you publish the first season of a podcast, what you're doing is essentially creating a contract. It's not a written contract. It's a social contract, an unwritten understanding between you and your audience. And a lot of us make this contract or jump into this contract without A, knowing that we're doing so, or B, understanding what it means to exist as a creator who has promised content to people on a regular, semi-regular, regular-ish basis. So, oh, my cousin Brandon is here. Hello, Brandon. Oh, hello, Carmela. Carmela's taking an editing break to say hi. Hello. I'm so glad everyone is here. I feel like at times, well, I want to go back to the social contract thing because this is important. Neil Gaiman, who's a very popular science fiction fantasy author, has written before and very well about what we as creators owe to our audience. And it's a really loaded question. It's a really, really complicated question. What do we owe to our podcast audience, to our reading audience? What do we owe to the people we promise content to, essentially? And this gets really tricky because, on one hand, we're doing this for free. Most of us are doing this for free. I don't charge money per episode. I don't charge people to access my blog. I don't charge people for my weekly live streams. It's all free, and I do it on my own time. And many of you also do it for free on your own time. So, part of us wants to be like, well, my audience can be grateful when I create this thing and give it to them for free. And I feel like that's a mindset that a lot of creators have. Like, yeah, I'm doing this for free on my own time, and they'll get an episode when an episode is ready. And so I don't want to say I consciously do that because nobody's like, I'm going to be a jerk and say, screw my audience, because our audiences are everything to us as creators. But at the same time, I own my own business, and sometimes, if I want to pay to have heat on when it's negative 17 degrees here in South Dakota, I have to do things that make money, and I have to do things like do client work. And sometimes that gets prioritized over like right now episodes. So it's hard. It's hard because we don't maybe 100% understand what kind of contract we've entered into with our audience. So when I say right now is a weekly podcast, which I don't say anymore, what do people expect? What do I owe them? Usually when you set an expectation, people will expect that you follow through with it. So if I set the expectation that the Right Now podcast is going to come out every Monday or every Wednesday, some people even specify a certain time. Some podcasts come out like every Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. and they have an audience that's waiting for them to do it. I'm not that organized, and my show has really suffered for it. I feel like last week we did a Q&A about just, whatever. It was like an Ask Me Anything. And several people asked about what it means to release content in a committed or consistent manner. And I said last week that when I skip weeks, when I fall short of the commitment that I've either explicitly made or that they expect, and wherever that expectation came from, who knows? My listenership drops, and it takes time to build up my listenership back to where it was. And I noticed that with Girl in Space too. When I was regularly releasing episodes, my audience was huge. And, now, several months after my season 1 finale, obviously it's calmed down. But there's this very real question of, how are we promising to deliver content to people? Why are we promising to deliver content to people on a certain schedule? And where are people getting their expectations for our work? And again, this applies to podcasts. It also applies to blog posts. If you are releasing fictional work, if you have a weekly newsletter, which certain members of you need to be doing. Jimmy says, you owe them what you said you'd give them in exchange for their time, attention, and money. Ooh, yes. Because even sometimes when our audience is not explicitly giving us money or saying like, hey, I paid you $20 this month, where's my 4 podcast episodes? A lot of the time they are paying us with their time and attention. I'm a big fan of Seth Godin, who's just a modern marketer / I know a lot of people hate the word guru, so I won't use the word guru. He's a modern thinker and content creator. And he talks about, we live in an idea economy, an attention economy. Attention, not money, is the scarcest resource there is. And it's what we as content creators need to be garnering, is time, attention, other people's energy. And our audience, when they set aside their time in their day to listen to us, to take in our message, to hear our story, they're entering into that contract with us. They're entering into the equation with us. And what are we doing if we let them down? Well, we're losing audience members, right? Sean says, I love your mindset and I need to bring that on board. It's too easy to slip into a gotta post every week because content and algorithm. Yeah. So part of what I want to talk about tonight is not only the pressure that comes from needing to produce content because of this like thing in our minds that's like gotta create, but also the pressure that we get from people who just want more from us. So Damien says he's feeling that with Cybernautica right now, and it's a pressure cooker. Whew, yeah. So I know what this feels like, and I've likened it before to, and I think it's in the description for this video, trying to outrun an avalanche. So we're all content creators. We're running downhill. If you know what I'm feeling, if you know what I'm talking about, if you felt this way, let me know in the comments. But you're just running and this avalanche is coming behind you and you're like, oh no, 3 months ago I launched a podcast and I told people it was going to be weekly and I've missed 2 weeks already. Because I've done that. It's really, really real. And there's a lot of fear that's tied up in that too. There's fear of our own integrity, of showing that we don't have integrity and we can't keep our commitments. There's fear that we'll lose our audience, which is extremely difficult to win back sometimes. If you've lost listeners, winning them back can be quite hard. There's fear that you will be perceived as disorganized, inadequate, out of touch, not caring about your audience, whatever. And fear that maybe you shouldn't be doing this. I've felt that sometimes too. I've felt that, who am I to create things? It's so interesting because as creators, we know how hard it is. We know how much hard work goes into creating. So each episode of the Right Now podcast is 30 minutes long when it's released. But creating each episode takes me upwards of 15 hours. And people don't realize that. And so I worry about what I look like when I skip a week and I'm like, I'm sorry, I just couldn't do it this week, or I was out of town, and people are like, really, you didn't have 30 minutes to create an episode? Because the finished product is 30 minutes, but people don't always see what goes into it. It's like, yeah, I didn't have 15 hours this week to create an episode for you, and the show art and editing it and all that stuff. Oh, Davis says, me during October and November with editing episodes that were getting more complicated. Yes. And I felt this too with Girl in Space, because I jumped into creating an audio drama, so a fictional podcast, without understanding how immensely different it was going to be without understanding how immensely different it was going to be from a nonfiction podcast. So I had budgeted like 20 hours a week for an episode, when really episodes of Girl in Space were taking me 80 to 100 episodes because of coordinating with actors and picking the best line, the best take of each line, and everything, doing sound design and not knowing what I was doing and feeling my way through it. Joshua Fisher says, I have often thought I should increase my release schedule to every week instead of the 1st and the 15th of each month, but I tested that in January and it's a really tough commitment to keep. It is. It absolutely is. So, and Damien says, it's like no matter how hard we're working, it feels somehow disingenuous to be like, we love you, it's going to be worth it, but being unable to show anything for it. Okay, Damien, to that point, I talked about this a little bit last week too, but not everyone was here for that. And so I talked about showing your process. So one way to let people kind of in and to give them content while they're waiting for the main content is to, I don't know if I want to say like keep them waiting or do crowd control, maybe is the phrase that I'm looking for, by taking pictures of scripts and posting them on social media, or releasing 30-second teasers for the upcoming episode, if you have the time and energy to put something like that together, or, just showing your work as you go. There's 1 second, I'm going to grab something, because it's over here on my little table to the side. Scooch back over. There is a wonderful book called Show Your Work, and I shared this last week too with the live stream, by Austin Kleon. And there's physical and digital versions available. And if you're like, oh my gosh, I don't have time to read a book right now, I want you to look, it's fun. It's got like big words in it and stuff, so it goes real quick. But basically the book encourages you to share the process as you create. So maybe you don't necessarily say like, hey, here's my notes where you can clearly see the spoiler for the finale, but more just saying, hey, I'm putting a lot of care and time into what I'm creating, and maybe sharing these little snacks with you can take the edge off your hunger, make me feel better about being transparent with my process and giving you stuff in the meantime to keep you occupied while I try to make the absolute best product that I can for you. the idea of entering into an unwritten contract where we are obligated to create content on an ongoing basis forever in perpetuity is mind-boggling. It's absolutely mind-boggling. Paula says the How I Died podcast is great at dropping breadcrumbs between episode releases. Yes, dropping breadcrumbs. That's a really good way to put it, because that lets the audience know that, like, hey, I haven't forgotten you. I'm not dead. I'm still here creating cool episodes for you. And here's a sneak peek. It makes people feel in the know. It lets you connect with your audience in a more intimate way. There's just a lot of greats. I kind of want to do like a story time thing where I read this book to you and like yes, class, can everybody see? And you show it around. But I won't do that. I'm just going to encourage you to read the book, because also that would be really legally terrible, so I'm going to only share my own content here. Let's see. Robert says, oops, I got to scroll back up here. Robert says, I'm finishing the whole season before I release the first episode. It takes some pressure off, but now I've got to worry about extras in season 2, so the pressure just relocated. Yeah. Ooh, wait. Oh, look at that. There's a cool feature where I can share people's comments. Technology. Oh, this is great. So here's Paula's comment. Look at this. The How I Died podcast is great at drawing breadcrumbs between episode releases. Oh, this is a game changer. I have a new favorite thing. Oh, yeah. Okay. So Davis, I don't know if you can see me. I'm going to creep over this comment here. So Davis says, when I hit my mid-season finale, I decided to take a really big break in order to conduct rewrites, rehearsals, season 2, writing, recording, and then edits so that I could have material out there on a more consistent basis. And along with that, I need to work harder on Patreon content. I feel like I'm going to have just a special live stream on its own about keeping up with Patreon content. Yeah, I'm really excited about this comment display thing. I got really distracted for a second, ooh, there's a shiny new technology thing I can use. I like that. Okay. This live stream has just become read along with Sarah. Okay. Got to keep hydrated. So before I got really, really distracted by all of these very fun technologies, I was talking about how just mind-boggling it was for creators like us to engage in these contracts with our audience. Like, hey, I'm starting a podcast, which means, well, now I have to create an episode every week forever. Because that's not realistic. That's just not realistic. So I want to talk about how we set expectations. So first of all, be very intentional when you set expectations. And what do I mean by setting expectations? So basically, I want you to very clearly communicate what you're promising to your audience. So you can make this commitment on social media. I would make it in the most amount of places possible. So what I'm talking about is in your Twitter bio, if you're on Twitter, if you have a account for your podcast. So the Right Now podcast has a Twitter account. I would say, a weekly podcast about writing, creativity, and the pitfalls of modern life, which is not what it's about, but this is an example. if you have a bio that says that, if you have an Instagram bio that says that, if your meta description for Apple Podcasts or whatever media host you use and distribute out, whatever your meta description for your show says, if it says, hey, this is a weekly podcast, or I know when I first released Girl in Space, boy, I think my first meta description for it was that it was bi-weekly, which meant every other week was going to be a new episode. That did not happen. And I have since changed my meta description. But take a look at what you're promising your listeners in your descriptions, in your bio, just wherever you tell people about the show. If you can promise some sort of consistency, then promise it. But if you are the kind of person like me who, and I want to like talk about this in more depth in just a little bit, but if you're not great at following schedules and keeping commitments, I think it's okay to say this show updates sporadically, or this show updates when life allows. This is something I need to do myself, and I haven't. Kevin says bi-weekly. Oh, wait, here, I can use my fun new tool. Kevin, look at you. Kevin says bi-weekly. That sounds really tough. Yeah, that was back when I didn't know how hard it was going to be. So everything I ever create, I do sort of experimentally. And so I've come up with this podcasting process just from my own several thousand hours of trial and error. That, in discovering what works and what doesn't, and in failing a lot, and in failing at being biweekly, and then even failing at being monthly, and then failing at being bi-monthly. Like, I'm going to get this like deer in the headlights kind of look in my eyes because, yeah. So, okay. Set expectations. Clearly communicate with your audience. So if you have a set expectation, and if your Twitter bio, or your Instagram bio, or your meta description in your podcast host says, a weekly show about cars and crickets. I don't know. I don't know if I would listen to that show, but if you make that kind of promise, if you set that kind of expectation, clearly communicate if and when it's not going to happen. So in your Instagram profile, or excuse me, in your Instagram feed, like if you just spend 10 minutes making a graphic that says like, hey, everyone, no episode this week. And you can give an excuse or a reason, or you don't have to, but you can clearly communicate. You can say, hey, no episode this week. Life sometimes just gets the better of me, or no episode this week. My mom's in the hospital, or, no episode this week because this, or even just no episode this week. That's fine. Just clearly communicate. And you will have some people, I don't know, I'll say like 1 to 5% of people will be like, whatever. 95 to 99% of people, if they like your show, they'll be like, oh my gosh, I hope your mom's okay. Or, oh my gosh, take the time you need to get better. Yeah, Damien says, I know you got some heat from people who felt let down about releases, which must have been hard and couldn't have helped the production process. And then he says, also, I don't think I'll ever try to write a thing while I produce it again. It's just too much in practice. Yeah, so we're going to touch on that in just a little bit. The organization of our production process is something that I want to touch on. So don't let me forget that. But yeah, just be honest. Be honest, be authentic, and just say, hey, there's no episode this week. This is taking longer than I thought. Or if it's an audio drama, say, hey, Girl in Space or the Black Tapes or whatever your show is, we'll be back after a brief 2-week-long hiatus. And it's okay to be generous with yourself about how much time you are allowing yourself to rest and recuperate and heal and get back into creating. I know a lot of the times, is that a phrase? I don't know. A lot of the time, um, we feel like if I don't get an episode out every week, or if I don't get an episode out when I say I will, I'm out of integrity, or I'm a failure, or I'm worthless, or we say a lot of kind of nasty and mean things to ourselves. And I do this too. I do this a lot. Our inner critic is often a lot harsher and nastier than even the worst 1-star reviews that we get. And I have gotten 1-star reviews about Girl in Space not updating when I said it would. Part of what we can do about that when we're setting expectations is to set expectations with ourselves about what kind of time commitment creating a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, quarterly, what have you, daily even, show will take from us and what it means. Megan says, I like the when life... Oh, here, wait. I can share this with you. My new toy. Megan says, I like the when life allows approach. I'm terrible at setting up a blogging schedule, and then I get overwhelmed by said schedule, panicking and running away for the next few months. Amen. We run from the avalanche, and then the avalanche consumes us. And it's hard. And we get overwhelmed, and panic and anxiety and fear and feelings of failure compound each other, and they make it worse. But what we have to do is set our expectations with ourselves and say, hey, I'm going to try. I'm going to, I'm going to say this is going to be a bi-weekly show because I think I can manage that. I've scheduled out my time and I know that I can make that happen. And then when one of our kids gets the flu, or our dog won't stop throwing up, or, the pressure cooker sets off a butter fountain and your whole kitchen is covered in hot oil, you got to give yourself some grace. Because at the end of the day, most of us aren't doing this with a huge support team. Most of us can't say, let's have my assistant type show notes later. I don't have an assistant. I do my own show notes. And I'm I don't know, like, not to be unhumble, I'm a fairly successful podcaster. I don't have an assistant. I get emails sometimes like, hello, Girl in Space team, or hello, Right Now team. If one of you could get back to me about this, that would be fantastic. And I'm like, it's just me. It's just me. And a lot of the times we're just doing all the things for our shows. I do my own graphic design. I do my own editing. I make my own coffee. Sean says, y'all remember those pages, right? The under construction signs might as well be tombstones. Yeah. Oh, okay. Wait, and I want to share this too. Sorry, I'm going through and reading the comments. Jimmy says, I started a bi-weekly email that was supposed to deliver a new short fiction story every 2 weeks. I remember that, Jimmy, because I subscribed, because you're a good writer. Jimmy says, I did 3. The last came out almost 2 years ago, and I still feel a ton of guilt. Where does that guilt come from? And I'm not asking this question because I have the answer, because I feel guilt too. I am a people pleaser at heart. And I am terrified of letting people down. That's a huge fear of mine. Like, and yet it's something I do on a regular basis. I let people down all the time. I don't have a Right Now podcast episode this week. I've been working on some other projects. I've had a lot going on. And after a while, sometimes I feel like in our own heads, we have these little echo chambers. And the reasons that we have for not keeping up with things start to sound like excuses to us, even if they're still legitimate. Amanda says you should get yourself an unpaid intern. Who wants to be my intern? Show of hands. Someone come be my unpaid intern. Kevin says, hey, I guess when you get consumed by the avalanche, don't panic, create an air pocket. It's fit to know which way is up and start digging. Allie Hilton says me. Allie, my unpaid. No, I would want to be here. This is a subject for a whole nother day, but I want to talk about paying people fairly for their work. Oh, that's a low subject, isn't it? Okay. I'm getting way off track here. So we're talking about we're talking about feelings of guilt, of worthlessness, inadequacy that comes with not living up to the expectations we set for our audience and for ourselves. And sometimes you just have to forgive yourself because we're human. Because most of us don't have a team. Most of us are doing this essentially as a hobby. This is another reason that I say it is so important. It's so important to make friends and build community with other creators. So if you're watching this and you're a writer, musician, podcaster, whatever it is, our work can get really, really lonely and it can be really, really heavy. And it's really important for us to have a support system because a lot of us, like I said, we don't have teams, but we do have each other. You have the Seriously Successful Podcaster Facebook group. If you need support, let us know and we'll be like, oh my gosh, I am here for you. How can I support you this week? Oh, I have people volunteering to be my unpaid intern. Oh, you're all so wonderful. Allie, no, you have so many projects. Oh. Allie says, I'm working on that forgiveness part and learning how to ask for help. Asking for help is really hard. This is something that I am trying to do in 2020 is learn how to ask for help. It's hard because in order to ask for help, you need to admit to yourself, to the world, that you are in a position where you need help. And we live in a society that venerates solo individuals, that venerates, the lone cowboy out in the desert with nothing but his gun and a horse. He should start a podcast. But we're not. You're in a community of podcasters who are all feeling very similar feelings of guilt, of unworthiness, of not enoughness, of panic, of the ever-consuming content avalanche coming after us. I'm just going to share this comment from Sean while I take a peek at my notes here. I was trying to think of some things that we can do to make the avalanche less threatening. And, I go to a lot of podcasting conferences where this is something that people talk about. And, you know, people will say like, oh, batch recording saved my life. And for those of you who aren't familiar with batch recording, so the concept of that is you plan out like 4, 5, 6 podcast episodes and you just record them all in one day. And then you have your next, 4, 6 weeks, 12 weeks, couple months of episodes that you can then just release, and you won't have to, worry about it. So that's called batching, because you record them all in a batch. And I don't know. If you've had success with batching, can you let me know in the comments? I've noticed that, I don't know if I'm just a low energy person, but when I've tried batching, I'll go through one episode and I'll be like, whew, okay. Whew, it takes a lot of energy for me. I'm an introvert. And I'll wrap the episode and I'll be like, okay, 4 more to go. And it's just like, I'm going to go take a break, and then I don't do any more. Let's see. Oh, there's a lot going on in the comments. Okay, but has batching worked for anyone? Does anyone here do batching? Allie says, I've started doing that somewhat. We do 2 episodes at a time, and we're planning on having most of the season done before releasing the season. And Joshua, batching has worked for me, but only because I record a Dungeons and Dragons actual play. Oh, so you play for 4 hours and you get 3 episodes out of it. That's really smart. Yeah. So it sounds like it's working for some people. I think it goes back to the reason why you podcast. So if you're, oh gosh, and this is just a whole nother thing in and of itself. Carmela says, I batch record. Damien says batching sounds terrifying. So maybe it just comes down to the type of creator you are and how you expend your energy when you create. Maybe I'm one of those people that I can write all day and like lose track of time and like get into that weird vortex where like 5 minutes goes by and it feels like 5 hours, or 5 hours go by and it feels like 5 minutes. Like, just time loses all meaning when I'm writing. But when I'm podcasting, I'm very much aware that I'm performing and I'm using energy, and I will need to crash afterward because introvert. Oh, I'd be very interested to talk about this more. Allie says, setting healthy and realistic schedules that can be flexible. Oh, yes. I'm just going to put this up on the screen. Setting healthy and realistic schedules that can be flexible has helped me a lot this year and season of podcasting. So I'm actually really proud of myself. I am not a vibe check. I am not an organized person. Okay. Like, I know there's this illusion of me having books on a shelf and like plants on a shelf, but like what you're not seeing is like the mountains of papers on my desk. Jimmy says game shows do this. Jeopardy records on Monday and Tuesday, 5 shows each day. Batching. Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. You have your equipment out. You have, like, if you're doing a video, like you've actually brushed your hair and you're wearing pants, it's a big deal. I want to show you real quick. For the first time, Joshua says the post-recording crash feels so good though. That is true. That is true. I don't know if this is like helpful or not, but like, I am not an organized person. And in fact, so like, these are my notes from the Right Now podcast episode 76. And it's just laying on my desk here. I did this episode in January, and this is just hanging out on my desk. So that shows you how organized I am, and also what my notes look like for a show. Not a lot. I took like 4 hours and I don't know if I like want to show you this like all the way, but I'll like dance around it. I planned out my year. I planned out when I'm going to write episodes of Girl in Space and when I'm going to start recording them and editing them and releasing them. And this was really good for perspective because what it did was it allowed me to see, hey, each of these steps takes a lot of time. Sometimes I labor under this illusion that somehow, and I think I got this because I was always that person who like wrote my college papers the night before they were due. Like I remember I wrote a 45 or 60 page senior thesis the night before it was due. Because I'm that person. And I always got them done. And I think that mentality has carried over into podcasting. So Damien asks, I'll just show his comment. He says, I wonder, do you guys who batch work with a team or do you do so alone? I have the same issues as Sarah where I feel exhausted after an episode wraps. And he says, I imagine it might be more manageable with partners. And it sounds like doing it with a team is a little bit easier. And I wonder if, doing things like planning out your week or your year and sticking to that schedule is helpful. If it's helpful to get more organized, so maybe if I cleaned off my desk a little bit, I would feel less panicked and less avalanche runny after E, run away from E. Yes, that's a thing that exists. I also, for the Right Now podcast at least, I have a running list of, so I always have at least 80 episode ideas in a spreadsheet on my computer so that I am never at a loss for what to talk about in an episode. And I just keep it updated. I always try to keep 80 or more. I don't know why I fixated on the number 80. I always try to keep 80 or more podcast ideas for topics in this spreadsheet. So maybe part of it is getting ahead of ourselves and doing a little bit of planning and if you have an audio drama, you don't necessarily need to worry about topics. I have also on my desk, I have my Girl in Space season 2 planning notebook. And I just always have it with me. I write down ideas. I can't let you see this yet. But you can see the cover. It has a Jurassic Park sticker on it. I'm going to go through the comments real quick, but then like I said a little bit earlier, and then I'll get to the comments in just a second. A lot of it comes down to why you podcast. So for me, I have my list of 80 potential topics for right now. But the large part, and I've had to discover this over the years, this is not something I went into podcasting thinking, is I podcast to understand. I podcast to learn. And again, I didn't know that this was a thing until several years. This is something I had to realize several years into podcasting, was the value that I get out of podcasting. It's not about building my brand. It's not about getting speaking gigs. It's not about making money. It's about refining my brain. That sounds so weird, but because I noticed that every time I record an episode of Right Now, when I do it, so you saw the very small outline that I work from. So I just have a few things written down. I realize and I learn as I teach. And I learn as I go and I get insights about things. And like that's really what jazzes me up about the podcasting process. And so it's really hard for me to schedule that in. Okay. I just had to process that. So I just had a little learning moment for myself here on tonight's live stream. And it was very meta because it's also why I podcast. It's so I can digest my thoughts and learn. It's like blogging kind of almost. Okay. Let's see. We were talking about batching and teams. And Joshua says we have 6 people on our show and a team makes it much easier. Plus, it helps keep up the energy while recording. Allie says I have a team of 3 to 5 writers, depending on the show, with 2 sound editors. That way we can divide up the work. Oh gosh, yeah. Yep, dividing up the work. Paula says audio drama podcasting is a different beast. Yes, I can batch, but I'm not episodic. Yeah. Also, I plan quarterly. Oh, thank you. So, batching is one way to do it. And what it does is it saves you sort of the setup and tear down time. And it kind of gets you into the space and lets you focus on, churning out several episodes at once. But yeah, it's not for everybody, but it works really well for the people it works really well for. I think I'm comfortable saying that. Oh my gosh. If you don't batch record, you can still stay ahead of yourself. I with a lot of podcasts who don't do anything, before it's due. So, in fact, I want to say the majority of podcasts are really good about this. They'll create an episode and say, "Great, we've interviewed you. Interview will air 6 months from now." And I'm always really impressed. I'm like, oh my gosh, if that was me, I'd be like, yeah, your episode will probably air tomorrow afternoon if I can, edit it quickly. So I don't know. Maybe a lot of this is just my own disorganization. Allie says, I podcast because I want to challenge people to think critically about the story in our own lives. Yes. Yes. Sarah says, I want to do a podcast because I express myself better with my voice than my written word. Yeah. And it's interesting to think about what your why, your reason for podcasting is in the context of the production process itself. So I kind of challenge you to think about that. Oh my gosh. I've almost been talking for an hour. That's crazy. See, and then I say like, oh, I don't have enough time to podcast. I can easily do this on a video. Maybe I just need to start because I've got my mic here. Maybe I just need to start running Audacity in the background and recording these live streams and then cutting them into podcasts. It would certainly be, time effective. There is. So for a while, some people know this about me and some people don't. For a long time, I was going to be a professor. I was going to get my doctorate and I was going to teach. And that ended up not happening because of a lot of different reasons. But something stuck with me, and it was this whole idea of, in the academic world, there's this thought of publish or perish. And basically what that means in academia is, hey, you need to keep publishing to keep your credentials up, to keep your street cred, your academia cred. You need to let people know that you're still the master of your subject. But I got to thinking about this in the context of podcasting, and publish or perish feels a lot like what we saddle ourselves with. There's a lot of talk about pod fading. and I know I'm dropping a lot of terms tonight, but pond fading is when a podcast just sort of fades. So like it's a weekly show and then they miss a week and then they miss 3 weeks and then they miss 3 months. And then you realize, hey, they haven't released a new episode in 2 years. And I don't know if we can consider that perishing or even any kind of failure. I don't know. I'm still going to go back to the whole setting and living up to expectations thing. So communicating clearly with people. So I think perishing in this case, would mean giving up or stopping completely or pulling your RSS feed, which I've seen some podcasters do. I don't think we need to do that. We're allowed to go on hiatus. We're allowed to take a break. Maybe you who feel like you have very naively signed an eternal contract of eternal production can think about seasons. So, hey, season 1 guest will, the season 1 will end, pick up, and that's perfectly acceptable. Kevin says, yeah, podcast just sort of fading. Oh, wait here. Podcast just sort of fading is sad. But of course, most people do this for free. Right. And so we're constantly. Oh, and apparently the term for YouTubers is dying. So I'm glad we don't have to deal with that. I'm really glad we don't have to contend with that term. That's so loaded. Oh. Allie says, I think as a community, we need to be more gracious towards people who have to take a step back to take care of life. Yeah. And this is another topic entirely, and I won't go into this tonight, but talking about taking care of ourselves and understanding that self-care is an important part of what we do. Kind of funny. I did an interview with Sarah Golding, who is an amazing human being. She does a podcast called Madiva, Madiva, for people who do podcasts and voice acting. And actually, the episode that she released earlier this week was an interview with me about self-care for podcasters. So go listen to that. We had a great conversation about it. Make sure you're hydrating. But I don't know. I'm just going to put this up and just leave it there for a little bit. Self-care is important. It is. Because there's only one of us. We got to take care of ourselves. They call podcasting, a cult of personality. And if your personality is suffering because you're not able to take care of yourself, then I feel like we need to reorganize some of those priorities. That was Tim in the next room. Thanks, Tim. Sam says, I was ready to fade for a while. Allie says, I've learned I don't work as well by myself and that I need a team. I'm a people person. I think that we'll talk about in a later live stream, we'll talk about building a team and what that looks like. But I think for now, Joshua says, can we get a my personality is suffering bumper sticker? So this is interesting. And again, you're just going to see part of my face because this is a bigger comment. Jimmy says the podcasting audience does not largely understand the difference when they start listening to you. Your audience might later, but might not. And I don't know how to solve that particular problem. So are you talking? Oh, wait, sorry, Dub. You have an earlier. Sorry, Jimmy. The problem for indie podcast producers is that we're all competing with corporate podcasts made by big networks and other media companies. So I hear this a lot. And I really want us to work hard on dispelling the notion that we're competing against each other. And this goes toward what I was saying, a little bit earlier about us being a support network for each other. And I want us to think about ourselves as all being in this together and not competing against each other for that elusive share of ear. And it's interesting because, earlier I was talking about setting expectations with your audience and saying like, hey, this is a weekly podcast, or this is it comes out when I feel like it podcast, or this is a as life allows podcast. But as Jimmy was saying, the expectations are not always established by your Twitter bio, or your podcast expectations are not being set by even necessarily your meta description in Apple Podcasts. The expectation or the standard is being set by the collective of all podcasts. So if people get used to, when I started Girl in Space, I was listening to the Black Tapes and Tanis, and I don't even remember what else. But they all came out every 2 weeks. And I was like, well, that's the standard. And I thought that as a creator. I also thought that as a listener, as an audience member. And I think, Jimmy, your point is really, really, really poignant, because I think what you're saying is, as we move forward and as more corporations with bigger megaphones start establishing that, like, hey, podcasts usually come out once a week, or podcasts come out bi-weekly, these giant 100+ hour per episode audio dramas release bi-weekly. And, the big corporation can make that happen because they have funding and they have a team of 75 people per episode. And the public doesn't know the difference between an indie production that's just one person, hence those emails that I get like, Dear Girl in Space team, and it's just me. They don't know the difference. And so their expectations, so they're not going to cut us any slack. And I think that that's the fear that Jimmy is talking about. And I don't have an answer for that. But I think that podcasting is an intimate enough medium where we can communicate directly with our audiences and let them know. And maybe this just comes down to intentional planning and, again, expectation setting on our part. So maybe if we miss a week, maybe we need to, grab our microphone, grab a Zoom recorder, grab your phone, and just record, hey guys, this is Sarah from the Right Now podcast. It's Wednesday morning and I know you're expecting an episode, but I just wanted to let you know that things are not going great right now and I'm going to need to miss this week. I love you all and hope you're safe and happily writing. And maybe you release that to your RSS feed. And you build a rapport with your audience when you podcast. And I think that if you even released something like that, then your audience will know that, like, hey, okay, I can have different expectations for this podcast than I do for something on NPR that has a huge engine behind it. So Jimmy says, and I'll put this on the screen here. Jimmy says, I don't know, I think we're competing for attention whether we admit it or not. And okay, Jimmy, this is going to be, I don't know, I shouldn't make any promises. Competing, I'm making a note here on one of the many, many pieces of paper on my desk about the notion of whether we're competing against each other or not and what that means. I feel like that should get its own talk, because I have a lot of feelings and a lot of opinions about not only what that means for us and for our listeners and our relationships to each other as creators, but also what it means about the future of this medium. So I'd really like to tackle that as its own show. And Jimmy says we won't hold you to it. Okay. So right now it's 8:15 p.m. and I've had a long day. I think I'm going to finish my coffee and I was going to say, like, write a whole bunch of emails, but that just sounds like the worst, doesn't it? I think I'm going to let you go for this evening. I want to thank you so much for being here. The comments tonight, the questions tonight have been amazing. Ooh. Rebecca says that can be related to scarcity feelings. Yeah, and that's what I want to, I think, talk about when we talk about the notion of competing with each other. So I think that this is going to be a really good and rich discussion. Paula says, send emails tomorrow, cocoon tonight. Oh, bless you. I think I will, especially because ironically earlier in tonight's live stream, I was talking about self-care. So gotta practice what I preach. Okay, so no emails tonight. I'm gonna like read a book and drink my coffee and just relax after today. But I want to thank you all so much for being here. I would love to hear those of you who are watching this live stream from my Seriously Success. I couldn't remember the name of my group for a second. It's been that kind of day. My Seriously Successful Podcasters Facebook group. Underneath this video, if you want to keep the conversation going, or even let me know what your thoughts are on this sort of pressure to produce, this production frenzy. What do you do about it? How do you deal with it, or how do you not deal with it? Have you had a podcast before that's gone into pod fade because of it? Have you had a little bit of a breakdown, like something that I went through when I was creating the season finale of Girl in Space? What does this pressure to produce mean for you? And do you have any advice to share with the rest of us about how to deal with it in a healthy, meaningful, and constructive way? All right. I'm going to sign off. Oh, thank you, Joshua. He says, thank you for putting this on. It's my first one, and I will be back to listen to more. Oh, thank you so much. That means the world to me. This is okay. I have to be honest with you. Part of the reason that I chose this topic tonight was because earlier I was talking with my husband, Tim, and I was like, I have to do a live stream tonight. And I'm like, it just, they add up and there's just so much pressure to, to create. And I was like, oh, that'll be the topic for tonight. But you always have things to talk about. You always have a message to share. And maybe part of creating is remembering that. So, okay. Good night, everyone. Have an excellent evening. Happy podcasting. I will see you for our next live stream. Goodbye.